Alright, this is Nate at Parker Learning Gardens, and I wanted to show you some of what we do for composting out here. So what we have here is a hardware cloth basket, so to speak, and what we do is we clip it together in these points right here, 3 or 4 clips. Sometimes I use nails, and you can kind of thread those in to this wire. This wire is really convenient. You can get it in large rolls. It's 4 feet tall, and then we try to get it to be about 3 to 4 feet in diameter, so you get enough volume to get the heat you would be looking for from composting. So I'm going to build this up today with some of the ingredients that we have here on site. One of the first things I'm going to add is some straw. You can use small branches, but you want a dry material that's going to provide a lot of aeration down at the base of your pile where it can get compacted. So I'm just going to sprinkle this down at the bottom of the pile. And this is going to stay, straw takes a while to break down. So it's going to stay down at the base, and it's going to allow that airflow to keep moving just enough passively at the base of your pile. Now this hardware cloth also allows for a lot of airflow through the sides of the pile. Here we have a previous compost that has mostly composted out. We've added these in layers, and we've just recently added a portion of this to our worm bin. So we're feeding our worms pre-composted material because they love bacteria and they love eating that up. So let's look at some of these ingredients. Straw, of course. We've got some brown material, carbon-rich material. Here what we're using is wood chips or sawdust, and this is all sawdust from Douglas fir trees. There's no added ingredients or anything. We have coffee grounds from a local coffee shop, so they usually have those in excess and provide them for free. We have some ash that is from our wood-fired stove. We know the wood that goes in there. It's all clean ash. And then we have biochar. We make biochar here at Parker Learning Gardens. And this is a combination of a little bit of bamboo biochar, and then of course hazelnut wood biochar. And we tend to sift our biochar, so this is a little finer, and this is the big stuff. We're going to go ahead and add the big stuff into our compost. A mix of different sizes can be beneficial. This is all going to be habitat for microorganisms in your compost. It acts like a sponge to retain moisture, and it's an incredible addition that is gaining popularity now in the world. But it's naturally occurring, so it's not a foreign addition to soil. It naturally occurs in forest fires and prairie fires. There's some accumulation of biochar, so it is a natural component of that soil cycle. Alright, so we've got our straw in there. Now we pulled up some weeds, and so I'm going to put some of this bigger material in there to start with. We've got some different weeds here, and I'm just going to drop this in. It's going to serve again as a little bit more airflow with this large material that's going to take a little more time to decompose.
Are you concerned about weed seeds?
I'm not concerned about weed seeds, because with this size of a compost you will get the temperatures that you're looking for to sterilize the weed seeds. So they're not going to be viable when you go to use this compost. So this style of compost that we have, we set these up around our gardens, all around Parker Learning Gardens. So right now we have anywhere from 8 to 10 of them in use, and we put them in locations near our gardens where we might be weeding or cleaning up the gardens or pruning, things like that. And it's convenient for us to add our additions to them right there on the garden site. And then at a later point, we'll take all these that have composted down and we'll add them to a larger compost setup that we have and combine several of them together to finish out. So some of the material on the edges doesn't quite finish out. It's acting as the insulator for your hot compost inside. And so when we mix it all together, once again, we get a more complete composting on a larger scale. All right, so I put some weeds in there. Now I'm gonna put some grass clippings. A great addition. We always generate a lot of grass. When we pick up our clippings, I'm gonna go ahead and use my hands. I'm just gonna drop that in there. You can see these were cut a day or two ago, already generating heat. Grass clippings are full of all kinds of bacteria and so forth, ready to take off. All that surface area is just full of it. And so we're going to spread that out a little bit, kind of make a layer. And now we're going to add a little bit of wood chips, sawdust. Make sure we have enough carbon. Typically you want to get a similar ratio of brown material and green material. So by volume, it's a little challenging to figure that out. So there's always some art to it, some estimation. And so I'm going to kind of shake this down a little bit so it kind of drops into that material that I've already added. So that's what's really convenient about wood chips, is they will kind of drop down into the material you're adding. So I'm going to add a little more of these grass clippings. Now I'm going to add some coffee grounds.
What are coffee grounds good for?
Coffee grounds are great. They add nitrogen as well. Even though they appear brown, they are pretty high in nitrogen. They're going to bring some moisture to the compost, and that really fine material. So a lot of this material that we have, grass clippings, biochar, wood chips, it's all very small in size. So it's going to break down relatively quick because there's more surface area. Adding some biochar so that we can get this all mixed up. Getting another layer here. So the biochar is not only habitat, but some proportion of the biochar will be available carbon for the microorganisms to metabolize. But the majority of that biochar is not going to break down.
And it's raining pretty good right now. Do you have anything to say about moisture in the compost?
Well, everything I'm adding, especially these grass clippings, tend to have a lot of moisture. Our sawdust has been outside in the rain, and so it's bringing in its own moisture. Usually when you layer something like this, you would want to add water to each of your layers. We're doing this in the rain, and we're adding pre-wetted material, so I feel like there's enough moisture content happening right now. But you do want to keep it moist. You want it to be like a wet sponge. If you grab your compost and kind of test the moisture, you just squeeze it like a wet sponge, and See if it drips out a little bit. You don't want it to be too wet though, because you want it to be aerobic. Too much water, not enough oxygen. So you're kind of trying to keep plenty of oxygen in there so that you can favor the thermophilic bacteria. That's what's loaded right here. You see that steam? This is already taken off with some thermophilic bacteria, and I can feel the heat in it. So, I'll spread out that layer of grass here. Got nature's watering happening. Naturally getting wet. And we'll add some more wood chips, sawdust. And we'll add some biochar. And I'm going to add a little bit of wood ash. It's a nice source of potassium. You don't want to load up your compost too much with wood ash, but
Also known as potash, right?
known as potash. Yep. Oh, that rain's nice on the dust side of that stuff. Keeps the dust down. It's always nice to wear your sunglasses in the rain. Okay, we'll get that stirred up. And we'll just keep layering like this. So we're going to add some more material. We've got some comfrey here. Always full of moisture.
What's good about comfrey?
Well, they call comfrey a bio accumulator. It's got a deeper taproot, so in theory, it draws more nutrients up from the soil. There's a lot of research out there that suggests it's similar to a lot of other plants, but it sure is awfully convenient to chop it down. It's really easy to chop down and add to your compost. Adds moisture and biomass to your compost really easily done by hand. Okay, here we go. We're going to add some more layers. Coffee again. And oh, one other addition that we didn't touch on, the common one, food scraps. We've got strawberries, apples, herb cuttings, banana peels, popcorn, in a popcorn bag that's compostable. We'll add our food scraps. Just give it a little stir, like so. And I kind of eyeball it. I see a lot of green material there. I'm going to add a little more sawdust. And keep doing in these layers of this material that we have. Trying to get similar, equal parts green material, brown material. And then we are adding biochar, and we have added biochar typically around 5 to 20% volume of our compost. And biochar typically accelerates. There's research now how it can accelerate the decomposition of your compost in addition to retaining more ammonia and nitrogen in the decomposition. So rather than that nutrient just volatilizing into the air, biochar helps to adsorb it and retain it in your compost, so there's less loss during the decomposition. So it's always a good idea, if you got it around, to throw in some biochar. And you don't want to add it directly to your garden. You want to add it to your compost so that you can inoculate it. It's like a sponge, not only for water, but for nutrients and for microbes. So if you add it directly to your garden, there'll be a drop in the fertility of your soil until it becomes inoculated, and then it acts as a battery. So ideally you charge that battery up in a compost environment, and then you add it to your garden after you get it composted in your...
Where can you find biochar if you don't make it yourself?
Well, we make biochar on site. You can also find it at a lot of... It's becoming more available at garden stores and so forth as more research gets done. But we make it on site. We also sell it through our farm stand on site. And our biochar is made with bamboo, hazelnut, and apple trimmings from our organic 33-acre farm, where we're not spraying anything on our trees. So our source of biochar is very pure.
So you guys sell biochar here, as well as you can get it if you went to a farm store in town or a plant store in town, nurseries.
Yeah. Yeah, a nice farm store is Backyard Farmer in town. They sell biochar there, and you can talk to them about its benefits as well. So, as you can see, I'm just going to keep layering this up, adding the various ingredients so that you get this relative mixture. And it's as simple as that. It'll be in this bin for about 4 to 5 weeks. And within the first 3 to 5 days, it's going to become very hot. We can dig into it and see the steam coming off. But after 4 or 5 weeks, we will just be able to unclip it on the side really quickly. You pull the wire off and you're left with this compost cake, huge cake. And then from there, we can move it into our main bin and finish out the composting.
And what would you recommend if someone was doing this in their backyard? Could they continue adding to it?
Yeah, so we've added, typically this is going to reduce down in volume. So if we fill this up within about 4 or 5 days, maybe a little longer, we could come back. It'll be down maybe a third. We can top it up, do that again after that time, and again. And then at that point, you may want to just let it go so that you're not continuing to add new material, but you can always have a second basket. Now, this might be a little large for somebody's backyard. You could scale this down and still get the temperatures you're looking for, but you don't want to go too small. Your typical limit as far as minimum size is 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. Then it'll act to insulate enough to reach the temperatures you're looking for to kill pathogens, knock out the weed seeds so that they are no longer viable, and just to get a quick acting and completed compost in upwards of 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the size of the material you've added it to it and the temperature of everything. It can happen pretty rapidly.
And you said you added this to your worm bin, this pre-composted material. Is it important to pre-compost before you add it to your worm bin?
Yeah,
or can you just add raw food scraps to your worms?
Well, worms prefer to eat bacteria. So if you add fresh, clean food scraps directly to your worm bin, there's a lag time in which those food scraps have to start breaking down before the worms are actually going to eat the bacteria that's metabolizing your food scraps. So we just give the worms pre-composted material so that there's plenty of bacteria ready for them to eat. The worm food is truly bacteria, and so direct addition of food scraps, you're typically waiting for those to kind of break down a little bit before the worms can really start eating the bacteria that forms on them. So we just enable an abundance of food for the worms by building the bacteria in a pre-composting situation. What's that?
Is there anything else that the food scraps might cause to happen if you add them directly into a really small worm bin?
Yeah, food scraps can, as they break down, they can get a little too hot for your worms. So it's inhospitable for worms to be above 90 degrees or so. So to avoid that, let that process take place in a compost bin. And once those thermophilic bacteria start to reduce, then you can add it to your worms, and there's no worry about it overheating. And you've created an abundance of food for the worms.
And if people locally here in the Eugene area want to learn more about what we're teaching here today and the soil food web in general, where can they find more information about that?
So we teach a class here at Parker Learning Gardens called Microbe Island. We create these little islands that favor microbial abundance through composting, and that class is focused on the compost food web, the soil food web, this process, what we do here, the additions that you can add to your compost, how you want to build it up, worm composting, all the details involved in that, the timeline, how you can use your compost, and all of its benefits and nutrients and so forth, and how it's a great addition for your garden, and it keeps a lot of harmful greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere if you compost at home rather than putting your food scraps into the landfill if you add them to your garbage. As well as a lot of other material that you can compost. A lot of people are adding that to their garbage, and it's not ideal. Taking up a little bit of composting is going to benefit the food you grow and the world you live in.
Where can they sign up for that class?
You can sign up for our class, Microbe Island, composting, through our website, parkerlearninggardens.org.
And is there a specific age range that this class is catered to, or can you bring your kiddos along?
Bring your kids along, bring the whole family. It's a really fun class. Not only are we just talking about compost and what's in it, but we're also going to kind of dig into our worm bin and look at the microbes, not the microbes, but the little creatures, the little arthropods, the worms, the little beetles. We'll give those all a look and talk about what they do. There's a lot of cool little creatures that help break down this whole system. There's an ecosystem that we take a look at. And so that's very, we feel that's very entertaining for all ages. And it's a great learning experience.
Great. Well, thank you, Nate.
Yes, thank you very much.